Take two.
Okay, thank you for bearing with us. It's not a real show unless there's a gremlin attack. Anyway, yes, we're going to be talking about building a chronicle, and as always, we're going to be taking questions from the Twitch. So if you have a question, feel free to ask, and we will get to it. Uh, so I figure we should start by doing a quick round of introductions. And let's start with our guest star, Ryan. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been up to?
Cool. Yeah. So my name's Ryan. I go by Comrade Bubbles here on Twitch and on Twitter. I'm on Patreon as the Moonlit Bard, but that's all 5e OGL stuff, so I won't spend too much time talking about that. But here on the channel, I run Behind the Screen on Tuesdays, usually at 9 a.m. Eastern, which is just a content creation show where I write adventures, not full chronicles because I don't have the time for that, but adventures for Storytellers, Vault, and Storypath and Access and places and the community sites. And I write those with the community's input and make those all available after the fact as a kind of this is how, if you're struggling to write adventures, this is how you can do it. And the benefits of communal storytelling and soundboarding. Yeah.
Awesome. Let's move to Chris if you want to introduce yourself very briefly.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I'm Chris, also known as the Primogen, and I run a Changeling the Lost second edition game every Thursday called Lil Brook Reunion. I keep forgetting that name for some reason. It's not at all long and complicated. I also have my own channel where I do lore videos on YouTube, and I've occasionally popped up in other games here on the Onyx Path. So great to be here as always.
And Jess, if we could get introduction from you too.
Needed to make sure I wasn't muted. Hi, I'm Jess. You might see me down in the thing as Angry Nerd Girl. I run Paws and Claws, The Lost Tales of Pugmire, every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern here on the Onyx Path. I also run my own Twitch channel, Angry Nerd Girl, and I run Three Flings, the D&D adventure of Three Tieflings on Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern. And I also write games and supplements and adventures. And in the real life, I'm a social worker. So that's my whole thing.
Neat. I am Rachel. I do freelance writing. I do freelance editing. I do Twitch stuff. You can find me on Stolen Fire. Pretty much everywhere. I just set up a Ko-fi, so if you feel like buying me a coffee, you can find me there.
Subtle.
Yes. Well, this is Storytellers with Coffee. And on that note, Ryan, what you drinking?
Well, fortunately, you've caught me at a good time for you, bad time for me. So I'm not usually one who suffers from hay fever, but this year, for some reason, I've got really mild hay fever that's led to like a month solid of irritated throat. So I don't actually have a hot drink today. It is a lemon and ginger infusion with a bit of honey stirred into it, just to help with the throat. It's in an obnoxiously large mug with Stitch's face on it as well. So
Show us. Oh, I love it.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's beautiful.
I love
it also
that.
came with this.
Oh, that's adorable.
It came in the mug, so
Your Stitch can be friends with my Displacer kitty.
woo! You can't see it, but there's a Bulbasaur plush behind me as well.
Neat. So let's just dive into the topic. So let's start with the general, where do your ideas come from? How do you pick up a rule book, open a Word file, and then some period of time later you have an adventure?
Oof.
Panic,
Wow.
usually for me. I even though I write stuff, obviously for the channel and for the community sites, for my home game that I run. I'm like 2.5 years deep into a D&D 5e campaign at the minute, and I don't really write stuff in advance. It's pretty much improv most of the time, but when I do write stuff, it's following the mood versus theme thing that was set out in, for me, the original New World of Darkness Blue Book.
Yeah, I often try to think about a realistic situation that will arise. And I used to be very meticulous in my planning for adventures, which never worked out well because I would stress about that a lot. And ultimately, I would be too focused on trying to shove the group into this very narrow path I'd made. Now I'm going to toss a problem at the group, a big problem for the session, and then a bunch of smaller seeds and see if anyone picks those up and work out of that. And it's scary because obviously you have to improve a whole lot more, but that's turning out way easier on my stress level to do that ultimately. So that's usually how I go about it.
Can I interject briefly?
Yeah, sure.
Did you also find that you're saving hours of your day a week?
Oh yes, it's definitely a time saver.
I started out writing everything out exhaustingly.
Oh my god, so many hours. Although I do think that while the plan is nothing, the planning is everything. So
yes,
when you make a setting and a chronicle, not so much when you make the adventure for the evening, but
yeah,
having a good idea what you want to do is always good. Sorry, it was a long-winded answer, but that's how I usually do it.
We've got 2 hours time.
Long-winded, all answers.
All right, let me just okay, so 15 more minutes for this answer, is that okay? No, I'm done.
I imagine if our audience gets bored, they'll tell us. So Jess, how about you?
So, kind of like Ryan and Chris, when I first started, I was so nervous when I first started running games. I actually made flowcharts for how a session could go. So I would put every like hook in and then put possible directions for how I thought players would take it, and then how those could go, and then find places I could meet them back up. And I had these long, elaborate like maps in my notebook of how
I'm just relating to this.
And eventually, I realized that I didn't really have to do that because no session survives a player. And now, I mean, as soon as I read a book, I pretty much get an idea in my head. Like there's something either about the setting or about character classes, or there's usually, when I read a new game, if I want to run it, it's because something in it calls to me and I get an idea for something. But it's never really concrete until I get a bunch of players together and I'm like, this is a cool thing. Let's make characters for it. And then I'll come up with a campaign based on their characters. Because if I make a big heist campaign and they all decide that they want to be farmers, I mean, that could be cool. That's like a Warhammer campaign. But, you know, it's going to be like pulling teeth to get to, you know, square pegs into a round hole kind of thing. Like you want the campaign to fit their needs.
The importance of a session 0.
Yeah.
Which I've never really done it before because the campaigns that I run, it's kind of like people just say they, because I started out like a local board game cafe.
Mm-hmm.
As they would just looking for GMs, well, DMs, I guess technically for the D&D. But I've since started freelancing and it's kind of allowing player choices at character creation to direct the game rather than fitting them into my plans.
I think there's definitely a sweet spot between having something there and over preparing. So, because you know, I've run games where I had like a quarter page of notes, and that was not my best work. So like not extensive, but detailed planning, I think, helps.
Yeah.
I personally am a podcast fiend. I always have headphones in. I'm always listening to something, and it's usually some sort of like historical podcast or biographical podcast. And I get a lot of ideas from that. So, like, oh, there was this one random uprising that nobody knows about. That's cool. I just listened to a podcast where about in 1902 they had an automobile race. Uh, it started in New York, and it was you were supposed to drive across the country, drive up north to Canada, cross the Bering Strait. Somehow they thought it would be frozen, and then
It is
drive
sometimes, I
across.
believe.
Yeah, so then drive across Russia to Paris.
What?
This was in this
That's
was
a
in
cool
1902.
That wow, yeah, that sounds like something they'd make a TV series about or something. That's really cool. I'd never heard of it.
Yeah, so yeah, and just like all this crazy stuff happened. So because they were sort of assumed that the Bering Strait was going to be frozen, they had to start in winter, which means they're driving across Illinois
Oh
during like
no.
a blizzard of the century type
Oof.
storm.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I really want to run a campaign somehow based on that.
I mean, you have so many opportunities to just do like little side stuff happening during this race. I love it.
Yeah.
Like it's a journey,
I mean,
like kind of like an 80 days around the world, or around the world in 80 days. That's the title. Yeah.
Yeah, and
yeah.
it's 1902 levels of automotive technology and
Yeah.
gas station
plowing.
infrastructure.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and that's like a perfect example where because I was gonna say for this season of Paws and Claws, when I planned it out, I was my idea was they're going on a boat to get to they're going to learn a thing on an island. So for that, it's like the race is the thing that you know. And then all of the other player shenanigan things that come up are the bulk of the adventure. Like, you have the skeleton of the plot that's like, it's the race. For me, it was they're gonna get on a boat at some point and go to this island. I know it's on the island, but all of the other bullshit that's been happening this season is stuff that players bring to the table.
Yeah. That's how my D&D campaign's taken 2.5 years to get to level 12. I know the endpoint. I know what the milestone's going to be for the level advancement, but how they get there is fueled by their wild conjecture.
Yeah.
There's so many different ways to approach it. Like, I was making the one-shot adventure of Cult for Virtual Horror Con, and when I want to make, if I want to make like a one-shot, for example, I haven't done that many, but I always go like, okay, what movie am I going to base this on, or what book? Like, I adhere very much to the idea that there's a limited amount of stories that you can tell, that you can, like, obviously this is not new stuff, but you can replace parts of it, but there's always a theme. There's a couple of themes that you're locked into. I started out with like, okay, I want to make The Shining, and then halfway through I realized, all right, The Shining is going to be too slow paced. I'm going to make 7 instead. So, and took the bases out of that and just changed stuff. But I want things to be familiar, and I think that's in any story, you want to have players fill in the details, and if it's a familiar story, they're going to subconsciously be like, all right, so this is how it works, and that's also a good start. There's no shame in finding inspiration in a story. Like, Lord of the Rings is fan fiction for old mythology, so it's it's all built on something else. So especially if you're starting out, don't be afraid. Heist movie, yeah, Ocean's 11. You can talk about Casino. Like, there's so many previously made stories that you can build on. Change little bits in it, make it unpredictable, but build it on a foundation of a good story.
And players
Yeah.
love when they figure out what it is that they're doing, because they feel like they discovered a secret.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's not tricking them. That's just being like, yeah, now you kind of know what's going to happen. Maybe.
So we've got our first audience question from Bad Monkey King. Any advice for trying to run a game on Roll20? I am not super familiar with Roll20. I'm in the Fantasy Grounds camp. So if any of you have experience with that platform.
Yeah. Sorry, do you want to go, Chris?
No, you go first.
I was just going to say, be prepared to do everything for your players, because players have no power in Roll20. It's all in the GM's hands. Like even to the point of you can't. So I use Astral for preference, and in Astral you can create your own character and import that character into a game. In Roll20, you have to, as the GM, create a character. It can be as bare bones as just name, and then assign that character to the player after they've joined the game, and then they can make build their character sheet and things like that.
Yeah.
Other than that, kind of before letting Chris speak, because damn it, this is my time. Don't be too reliant on the map. My campaign's on short hiatus right now, and we're doing a one-shot run by one of my friends, one of the players, sorry. And he's expecting that we're all looking where he's looking when he's like pinging the map or giving us directions. And some of the maps are pretty large that he's using. So treat it as like a visual aid, not as the actual tabletop, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. So, Chris, what were you going to say?
Right. I agree with Ryan in a lot of ways that you have a lot more work when you're running it through Roll20. I would say that it really depends on what kind of game you're running. Like if you're running a typical Vampire the Masquerade or World of Darkness or Chronicles of Darkness game, you might only be using Roll20 to show some environment or drop information or do dice rolling in it. It's a powerful tool, but it really depends on how you want to use it. I find it's absolutely perfect for running Dungeons and Dragons type games in it because it presents you a battle map that's very easy to find assets for. Usually when I run my online campaign of Dungeons and Dragons, I sit down maybe an hour, 2 hours before the game, and I make one encounter that I always want to have at least one common encounter. Might not happen, but it's always good to rely on. And it's very easy in Roll20 to put that out there. It's practically designed for that kind of gameplay. You can play background music in it that everyone can listen to, which is a great feature. You can whisper to people.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's a great system. And they also eased up a little bit on what kind of music you can put into it, because for a while you couldn't put anything but a certain few accepted homepages in there. And it was very limited in music. But now I got a whole bunch of Witcher music in there. Don't tell anyone. I don't think that's legal. It's only for my players.
So as long as you're not streaming, it's fine.
Yeah, exactly. You have to be very careful if you're streaming what you're putting into your video. Sorry for the little flashing down here, by the way. The afternoon sun is coming in. But yeah, long story short, Roll20.
You live in the environment.
Thank you. One thing that Roll20 is absolutely amazing with is that you can use dynamic shadows in it. It's a little tricky to work with, but I love it because if you're doing dungeon crawling, again, Dungeons and Dragons stuff, it's really cool to exploit like shadows, field of vision. You can emit light from certain objects. In that sense, very powerful tool. But again, it's certainly something I would only use for general maps and assets for Vampire, for example. But Dungeons and Dragons, I couldn't do it without it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Fantasy
like,
Grounds
sorry.
does have something similar where it's not, as far as I can tell, not quite as many bells and whistles as the dynamic lighting, but you can do a sort of fog of war effect and reveal things to your players as you feel like.
Yeah, I'm very theater of the mind person. Anyone who has watched any of my shows knows that I'm almost infamous for my maps. So I have only done Roll20 as a player, but like Ryan was saying, the DM or GM storyteller does have almost complete control over what's going on. And one thing I think is very cool about Roll20 is that they do let you have, I think, different maps. Like you can see the DM map and then you can see show a different view of it for the player.
You've got three different layers.
That's
a great tool.
That's very cool. Because I was just on a stream where I realized that the map that the audience was seeing was different than the map that I was seeing. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. They know more than I do.
I should probably stop watching this now.
Yeah, I was like, I'm just going to put OBS right in front of that. And so that's very cool. One thing I would caution about is I would say to use a different program for voice or video chat if you're going to use that, because Roll20 is kind of
Agreed.
notoriously bad.
And if you do that, don't forget to block Roll20 from accessing voice and video.
Yes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Because
It's
as soon as
finicky.
you log on to Roll20, at least mine for a minute, it was like, here's your picture. And I was like, dear God, no.
Yeah, absolutely. I also want to add that there's an API for Vampire V5, which great for keeping track of stats. But I use that in my stream for Chicago Stories just to keep track on blood pools. Oh, sorry, hunger die and rolls. But yeah, I agree. It's horrible for voice and video. Don't use it for that. Use Discord or Zoom instead.
I would also say, kind of, because obviously Chris has mentioned Fog of War and Dynamic Vision, as did Jess. Kind of look around, because obviously Fantasy Grounds exists. Astral exists. I use Astral. It's a bit more graphically intensive, graphically demanding. But if you want kind of basic weather effects in line of sight, that's free in Astral, whereas I think you have to have a pro account in Roll20 for that sort of thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, you do.
Astral doesn't have, as far as I'm aware, Astral doesn't have the light emitters though. But Astral's still very much in development. So.
Yeah. I like Astral. It wasn't as intuitive for me when I was setting up a game.
It's not.
But I saw the potential, and it seems like it can be really cool. I would just like it if they had a tutorial kind of built in for people like me. They have a tutorial. You just need
3
to,
tutorials now.
Oh, okay, good. Because when I was doing it, you had to like go find the tutorial.
Oh no, like you create an account and it kicks you straight to the tutorial, and then it says, here are 3 other tutorials if you want to play them.
That's awesome. Because before, when I created an account, it was just like, here you go. And I was like, okay. So that's good. It's gotten better.
Yeah.
I would also say you don't have to use any of these platforms if you're doing like a Powered by the Apocalypse game or anything that isn't map dependent. Like, you can play music for your players through Discord or through anything, really. If you have sound to your players, you can give them sound. As long as they don't need to see a map. Like, or just enough of a map that you could do the dorky thing that I do where I just hold it up to the camera. But
it works.
Yeah. Like, you're right here. But as long as you don't need sight lines, like if it's a mostly conversation-y game, like if your game is about relationships or friendships and you're not really fighting or exploring, you might not even need Roll20 or Astral or Fantasy Grounds.
Yeah.
This kind of ties in with Bad Monkey King's follow-up question about best platform to run an online Chronicles of Darkness. Like I'm starting a Monster Hearts game this weekend, and I've just set up a Canker for it, which is just like a campaign journal platform. There's one of loads. Again, do your research, find the one you like. But we're just going to use the Canker for all of the social, like, character details, and then just Discord voice chat for everything.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, just answering Bad Monkey King's question about best platform. So I don't have a lot of experience with Roll20, so I can't speak to that. But I would just do Discord and just get the dice bot, the dice roller bot. That's all super easy from there.
Yeah, I agree. There's a couple of caveats with Roll20. If you don't have a premium account, there's quite a lot of limitations, and also it can be very data heavy for some users. I've had players who couldn't see the map because it just won't load. And also, if you're starting out, you really don't need to go ham with the details. It can actually cost you more stress if you have to manage a bunch of things at the same time. So I definitely agree. A dice bot in Discord is more than enough to start out. And especially for a game like Vampire or Chronicles of Darkness or World of Darkness, which relies so much more on narration, bare minimum dice bot, that's all you need. Discord also has multiple channels. You can drop You can drop pictures in one channel. You can drop a map in another channel. You can have individual chats with your players in another channel. Discord is very multi-purpose in that sense. It allows you a lot of freedom as a storyteller to craft your own kind of multiple rooms to communicate, to post specific things in.
Yeah, what we all need is D&D Beyond for World of Darkness, Chronicles of Darkness.
Oh yeah.
So we had got a question from A Clockwork Jim. Any advice for running a game when you have ADHD?
I would.
Oh,
Sorry, I was just gonna say I don't have ADHD, so I don't feel qualified to answer.
I think advice we gave earlier is applicable here. That do enough planning that you kind of know where you want it to end up, and it really depends on your experience and how comfortable you are in improvisation, of course. But I would ask your players if you can record it, because that is a very useful tool if you can stand listening to your own voice to go back and be like, all right, that happened, and remind yourself. Because if you're running a game, your head is going like this all the time. You're listening to your players, you're planning ahead, you're thinking, what are we going to do now? You're keeping tabs on stats. You're going to lose what's happening in the present. So recording or asking another player to write notes and that they can give it to you. Ask the players to support you. I think that's a golden rule for any kind of storytelling. It's a community thing. They should help out too, or should try to at least.
Yeah, tagging off of that, I don't have ADHD, but as a clinician, I treat ADHD, and I have generalized anxiety disorder, which is presents pretty similarly. And I think not using your table, but getting your players to serve as resources for you, keeping notes. If math stresses you out and causes you to spiral, it's okay to have a calculator. Nobody's going to be mad at you. Or if one of your players is really good at math, you can even have them track hit points. I keep all my hit points out in the open. Math causes me to freak out. And all I do is I don't subtract from the total hit points for baddies. I just add up how much damage is on an enemy. And then I know when they're dead, but the players don't. They just see how much damage is accruing, and they can help me do basic addition. Because in the midst of all of that, there's too much going on, and sometimes I forget what 8 plus 4 is. Or when they're higher level characters and they're like, so I did 37 damage to that. I'm like, I don't know what that is. And so they can help. And additionally, yeah, sometimes you'll have a player who loves keeping notes. I have one of those players in my home game. We actually bought him a beautiful journal because he takes such good notes, and we wanted to be like, here, thank you for being such a good note keeper. Nice. But yeah, and let them know that, you would like to look at their notes, because stuff happens in game. And a lot of times when we improvise, you might not remember that you came up with Boblin the Goblin. You might remember that they went to a store, but not know the name of the storekeeper. So the next session when they're like, I want to go talk to Boblin, you're not like, who?
Exactly.
And lastly, if you struggle focusing in the session, it's your session. It's okay to get up and take a break. It's okay to say I need to go walk around the room. Or if you have, sorry, I'm going on this forever because I'm in therapist mode right now.
That's okay.
Really good advice.
It's all good stuff.
If you have some kind of totem in your hand that you can hold on to, I know some people like to wear jewelry that they like to fidget with. I have a fidget cube. I don't have it on my desk right now. It's in my car. But yeah, something that you can play with that keeps you doing a thing so that you can stay focused. Not fidget spinners. I don't understand the purpose, but an actual fidget cube and something that you can hold that's tactile and play with. Yeah, there it is.
They're great. I love them.
I feel
It got me
so
through
tapped
grad
right
school.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm spinning my bobble around my finger. I feel so attacked right now.
I have one of these too, but they don't help me much.
Yeah, no, I spin my rings, and
Yeah, for sure.
so if you can have like a grounding tool or something
Yeah.
like that, it'll help.
Yeah, I want to latch on
So-
to. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I am reluctant to self-diagnose for obvious reasons, but I have read sort of checklists of how ADHD presents in women. And for me, that was like, oh, that's why high school was so difficult for me.
Yeah, it's
So
very
I-
different. Yeah.
Yeah, so my advice would be sort of like, it's not a hindrance that you have this thing. It just makes the way you think and the way you approach problem solving a little bit different. So lean into the strengths that it gives you. And so for me, I found that I can keep track of multiple storylines pretty easily. Uh, and then, my weaknesses are, distractibility. And so you've got to come up with different tools to compensate. So for me, I've got a rule book with lots of different little bookmarks so I can easily look stuff up when I have to. And the key for me is really in preparation. So if I am planning a combat, will like create a little stat block with little boxes for each hit that they take. And, that prep keeps me from getting distracted, keeps me on task. And I feel a lot more confident when I start the game that I will be able to keep running it without it getting derailed.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Like prep work, it's for you, and it should
Yes.
help you. I would like to latch on to what we were talking about before about the getting up and taking a break. Super important. Like you're watching a show online, for example, they might not do that, but either they cut that away or it's a short session or they're used to playing this way. There's absolutely no shame in taking a breather. A friend of mine who was storytelling for a long time usually would say that if he didn't know what to do, he would call for a break for 10 minutes and then he'd think about what to do next. Or he would take one player aside. Of course, if you're doing this online, which most people have to do now, it's difficult. But he would take a player aside and be like, what do you want to do? What do you want to happen to your character? Might not work in your campaign. Obviously depends on the adventure, but it's always good to be like, all right, I'm kind of running out of steam or I have too many threads to keep track of. What do you want to happen to your character in this session? What are you going to do? Combining that with the break will give you a lot of time relatively to consider your next steps. And you can be like, all right, I want you to kick that off and I will follow up with you. So again, getting help from your fellow players or your players is a good strategy as well.
It's
Yeah,
very
and-
much the yes and approach.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if you are streaming, you can even bring in the audience in that break. Like, we don't take breaks on Pause and Clause because our time is so short. We only have 2 hours. But on Three Flings, every week we do an Uncaged one-shot. And some of those, our most recent one was just under an hour and a half. But our longest was 4.5 hours. And that one we really should have made 2 episodes. But we have a, we'll be right back intermission screen. And we tend to take those right when the players are stuck at a big decision or we just really need to get up. But we try and time them so when they're like, I don't really know what to do here. So we're like, hey, audience, tell us what to do. We'll be right back.
Yeah, and your players probably also want a break too. Like if you're feeling the need for a break, they're also probably feeling the need for a break. And maybe they feel like they can't outright ask for one.
Yeah, just gonna because I mentioned I run games at the board game cafe. I run a lot of taster sessions for people who've never role played before, and they feel like because I've spoke to, I get feedback and speak to them after the session and stuff, and a few of them have said that because they don't know what they're doing, they don't feel like they can ask for a break, and it's a cafe, they sell food and drink. People obviously want food and drink, but they don't feel like they can get up and get some. So, obviously, any kind of storytelling, in terms of games mastering, being able to tell when your players are getting antsy and do want a short break, very important skill to develop quickly.
Yeah, in my home games we used to, and it's
Yes.
who knows how long it's going to be before this happens again, but right before the game started, we would order food, and then when the food came, that was our built-in break.
That's a good strategy.
Okay, so moving on to our next couple questions. So while any given game has its own themes, there's a variety of sub-themes to explore. So, for instance, Vampire the Masquerade is about the slide from human to monster, but there's a lot of different stories to be told within that framework, at the neonate, Ancilla, and Elder levels. So, how do you pick your themes, and how does this influence the development of your adventure? Because I'm really a big proponent of picking a theme and letting that sort of guide everything that comes next.
I'm just gonna push my show. That's pretty much all my show is about on this channel. So watch it if you're still curious. Does anyone mind if I continue though with my answer?
Yeah.
Okay, so a life lesson here, life experience. If your first time running a campaign is Promethean the Created, please reconsider. It's a difficult game to get right with experience, and it was the first campaign that I ran. Like, I'd done one-shots of other systems. I'd done, as it was then, New World of Darkness games before. But when basically a friend of mine just really wanted to play it. He loaned me the rulebook. I read it. I was like, yes, this is an amazing game. I love the ideas here. I love the themes to explore. And then didn't realize that I'd have 12 weeks to do it in because I was graduating at the time. And I was moving away from my university. It's like, okay, so there's a bit of a time limit, but I can handle this. I didn't. I don't think that campaign, that Chronicle, went well at all. And they said they had fun, which I guess is the measure of these things. But I'm not that proud of it. But obviously, so for people who don't know, Promethean the Created is a Chronicles of Darkness game. I think it was one of like the third or fourth second edition they released, actually, which was really weird considering how
it was one of those
unknown it is.
Yeah, it was one of those shorter games because they released the major games and then a bunch of shorter, like Changeling was also short but got extended because of how popular it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a game in which you play as one of the created. You don't start off as human, and it's one of the few games that has a defined endpoint in which you become human. You can play beyond that. There are rules in the book about it, but the endpoint for most Promethean Chronicles is you become human. And the themes and whatnot are about just what it means to be human. And as I say, it was my first long form chronicle, and it's kind of, okay, how do I do this? What right now is the core of the experience of being human that I want to explore with my players? And as most Chronicles of Darkness games do, you have many splats. You have 5-player quote-unquote races, different kinds of Promethean you can be, and then a variety of philosophers that they can follow. So there's like, you can follow the Path of Gold, which is about social stuff, or the Path of Iron, which is punching things until they stop moving. And so obviously you've got a lot of people who are a lot of different ways of building a character to explore one idea through many different permutations. So I had 12 weeks to pull something together, and I kind of, because I was pretty stressed and under a lot of emotional pressure at that point, I just took that because I'm lazy, and like that was what I was experiencing at the moment. So it's like emotional responses, visceral emotional responses to situations. So after we had like the first 3 sessions out of the way, so people got to, because they, apart from the one guy who'd loaned me the rule book, none of them were World of Darkness players. They were all D&D players. So it's kind of got to get you to grips with the game first before I can do anything else. So you've got to know how the game works. You've got to understand something about how the characters work and how everything relates to each other. I had to sacrifice Disquiet for that, which is annoying. And Torment never really came up, which was also annoying because Torment's great as a storyteller. But it was kind of, right, we've got 9 weeks left. I'm going for the sucker punch. I'm tired, I'm stressed, and this was back when I was writing everything out in advance, and they had to follow my story. Gosh darn it. They didn't. They sidetracked. They went everywhere but where I wanted them to go. So I was like, okay, you like cats, and you like cats. You're going to find a box of cats in the shed, clearly abandoned.
Yay!
How do your Prometheans react to this? And then cut to like 6 weeks later, they're starting to experience how humans interact with emotions and how they convey, like how behavior can convey emotions and stuff. And they're in the lair of the big bad for a 12-week chronicle. And again, they're not doing what I expect them to do. So I have, let's just say, problems with control and loss thereof. Luckily, much better now than I was then, but they were not doing what I wanted them to be doing. I was like, okay, experimentation on these cats. They're the same cats. You can tell they're the same cats, but now they're mixed with Pandorans. Feel things, which, you know, in and of itself, not a bad idea, and to me, sort of a logical progression from how do Prometheans explore visceral reactions without, because so I'm not someone who experiences particularly strong emotions. Like, I don't know if that's a normal thing for most people or not, but I don't experience emotions that strongly. And trying to think of situations under time constraint and graduation pressure that would trigger an emotional visceral reaction kind of made me panic a bit. So I do admit I didn't handle it the best way, but there is an answer in there somewhere, I promise.
I think the answer is if you're feeling stuck, give your players a box of cats.
Yes, if they're like, dogs, if they like dogs.
Yeah.
And if they keep being bad, have them body horror their chosen animal.
I mean, that's some pretty good advice, I think.
Oh, I mean, certainly Chronicles of Darkness games.
Sorry, me?
Yeah,
Oh,
Jess,
right.
whoever wants to answer the question about just picking themes.
Jess, you can go before me.
Okay, I'll go. Again, I guess it kind of comes out of the players. Like, so I'll just use last season of Paws and Claws as an example, was supposed to be about corruption in the elite, because the nobles of Pugmire were up to no good. And I was like, cool, I can tie that in with the players because one of the players has a noble background, so her family's in it. And but because of the world of Pugmire and the racism against cats, xenophobia against cats in Pugmire, and kind of everything that was going on in the US at that time, it became about more than just the nobles are corrupt and wealth is corrupt, and it became about xenophobia and forced deportations. And now this season of Paws and Claws, and the other thing amidst that was their player characters were kind of focused on, amidst all of this badness around us that we're discovering about our world, how do we stay a good dog? There was only one cat player at the time, but they kept trying to tell him he was a good dog too, even though he was a cat. Like, he could still be a good dog. And this season, half of the players are cats, and they're going on a quest to solve an ancient mystery. And the overarching question that is arising is, does being a good dog matter? Because cats don't care about being a good dog. So they're kind of on this quest, but it's less like, yeah, we want to solve this ancient mystery. We want to bond, but we don't really care if we're good people while we do it. And some of the characters from last season who were like clinging to their dog-manity during all of this are like, no, being a good dog is how you like do all of this. And all the cats are like, but we're cats. We don't need to be good dogs. It doesn't matter. So we're having a lot of really interesting character stuff this season, coming from like last season being so focused on the world is dark, and even though it's full of dogs and cats and, you know, lizards and stuff, the world has a lot of badness in it, but we can still be good, to the world has a lot of badness in it and being good might not even matter.
That
Ouch.
seems really dark for a game where you're playing uplifted cat.
Yeah, it's like this is a game of you play sentient cats and dogs, and let's explore the meaning of humanity while we're at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's explore humanity through
Yeah.
our pets.
You
Because
never
if
know
there's
where he's gonna
anything I've
take you.
learned about Pugmire, it's that your first character is probably going to be your childhood pet.
Yeah.
Oh boy. But I wanna connect to something that you were talking about earlier. Sorry, just were you done, by the way?
Oh yeah, I'm done.
Oh, so, okay. Sorry, Ryan. You talked about session 0 a little bit earlier, and I think it really like there's two different tracks when you're setting out to start a campaign and how to pick your themes. Like either you're playing with a group you don't know that well or not at all, or you're playing with a group that you're very comfortable with. And I think it's your approach to this is going to be very different depending on how your group layout is. I think session 0, which is essentially, I think this term gets thrown around a lot, but it's the session before the game starts, where you all sit down and go like, this is what we're playing, this is what I want to play, this is the kind of mood I want to go for, what are people okay with, what are people not okay with. There's a whole slew of tools to consent sheets and discussing consents, veils, and lines and veils.
Lines of Veils,
Yeah. So all that stuff is
Yeah.
super important. You got to make sure that everyone's on the same level so that everyone can enjoy the game the most. If you're starting with a group you don't know that much, you're gonna have to either be like, depending on the length of the game as well, of course. If you're running a 3 adventure long game or 3 session long game, you might want to take more of the charge in what kind of theme the game is going to have, with input from the players. But if you're going like, all right, we're going to play until we get bored of this, it should definitely be collaborative. There should be plenty of stuff in there for every character to have personal moments of growth, of challenge, adversity, but also team building, stuff like that. It's very important. A friend of mine, I've mentioned before, we have our own setting in a game, which is completely dice free. It's essentially a combination of Ankh-Morpork from Discworld as well as the city of the Lies of Loch Lamora. So it's very steampunky, low fantasy. Sorry, yeah.
I was just gonna say it's a really good blend.
I've been wanting to read that book for a long time.
It's amazing. It's really
good.
good. Yeah. And it gives you this kind of cutthroat. I don't like to go into politics too much, but it's almost an extreme form of libertarianism. That thing where money controls more than anything else, like power, influence, and money.
Capitalism,
yeah, raw capitalism. Anything can be bought for money.
Objectivism, Ayn Rand's philosophy.
That's
it's essentially the people with the money are in charge, and the people with the old money are even more in charge.
So it's set in America.
I feel like we're getting sidetracked.
Sorry.
You have a whole bunch of elven houses essentially who are very, very old, and these houses are in charge of the city. And then they've given some power to humans, obviously with a bunch of caveats. And every time we're supposed to play in this, we sit down and go like, all right, which aspect of the city do we want to explore this time? We want to play bankers, all right? Or we want to play stockbrokers. All right, so suddenly someone came up with the idea that you can buy stocks in companies, which is very Discworldy in its approach to like, modern concepts in a fantasy world. And then we just run with it. Session 0, we just throw spaghetti at the wall, just get it out there. I want to be someone who invests only in companies that are going to fail and then sell them to suckers. Like, you go with that, and it's a communal creative process, which is obviously going to be very demanding if the storyteller has to carry everything for themselves, which is why you do it with a group where everyone knows each other. So you can be like, all right, let's collaborate with this. Collaborative storytelling is very, very different from running an online game with people you barely know. At that point, if you get into collaborative storytelling, that's a good group. A lot of times you will have to be the starting engine as a storyteller. At those points, it's very important that you're running a game that you want to run. And you can go back to my previous advice and be like, I want to run this movie with modifications. But if you got a group you're comfortable with, I just say, sit down and be like, all right, this is a setting. This is Waterdeep or Baldur's Gate or Chicago in Vampire the Masquerade. What kind of people do we want to be? Start there. You want to be a gang down on their luck? All right, everybody start throwing spaghetti at the wall. What kind of stuff is going to be in this game? Record it. You got so many story seeds to go with. A rival gang's moving in on their territory. One of their low-level pushers got beaten up by someone. People have gone missing. The police are investigating their gang. There's so many things you can do. But everyone should just take part of it in some capacity. I think those are always the most fun.
Yeah, and so I agree, and that sort of feeds into the next question, which is how conscious are you of writing or designing for an audience? And if you've got published experience in like writing a generic adventure for people that you don't know, how does your writing process change at all?
Oh, yeah, it's a huge difference. I wrote these pre-made adventures, for example, for Cult that I mentioned earlier. Like I said, halfway through, I was like, this is too complex. I can't run a game with people I don't know with these themes in it. I had to tone down a bunch of stuff because I was like, I don't know, and I don't want it to be too dependent on these aspects. So that's a very good thing that you're bringing up, Rachel, that it's so much more challenging to write for people you don't know of writing an adventure not much more, but it's a completely different challenge. Sorry for that little aside.
I mean,
Yeah.
sorry, do you want to continue?
Oh no, go ahead.
I talk about this a fair amount on my show actually, because so as I said, I run a lot of taster sessions, which necessitates playing with people I don't know a lot. So I'm more used to writing just single session one shots, and it's kind of that's comfortable for me because I know that in the time slot we have, it's like 2.5 to 3 hours by the time I've explained the character. Well, 2.5 hours by the time I've explained the character sheet in sufficient detail that it's usable. I know I've got 2 scenes, 3 at the max. Frequently, it's 1 scene because they latch onto one idea, and it's like, okay, I'm an hour and a half deep. I've got half an hour left. What single thing from the second scene can I move up to finish this off satisfactorily? I've tried my hand at writing longer adventures. I think it was the first thing I did when I started working on my website again, which has gone on hiatus for like months at this point, so I'm not going to bother mentioning it. I wasn't going to bother mentioning it, but was to start a Titan's Grave, Ashes of Volcana campaign, like 12 thing campaign, and I gave up because I'm very much more into the collaborative storytelling than here. You must follow this campaign guide. So I was trying to consider every possible eventuality about what the player could do in this circumstance, and then simplify every answer I could conceivably think of into like 3 bullet points, which you can't. So when it came to writing the first series I did on my show on this channel for Scion, there's an investigation involved, and it was kind of rather than listing exhaustive ways about how information can be found out, it's here is the clue that you can provide, and here's the information that the players could find no matter how they investigate it. And it's just kind of more of a generic scattergun approach than exhaustive detail. But that's just as an unpublished community member. I will bow out to people who have publishing credits.
Well, I think that you've got a really good idea there, which is it doesn't matter how they go about investigating, this is what they'll turn up.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think that's a really good way to run an investigation.
Yeah, that reminds me of there's a cool thing in the Witcher tabletop RPG that has in their bestiary, no matter how well they roll, this is what anyone who is not a Witcher knows about this monster. And it's pretty much not true. But this is what they know. And then if they're a Witcher, this is what they know about the monster.
I love that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So, like, how to kill it, where to find it. So, if you don't have a Witcher in your party, they might have all of this false information and go in there and be doing the exact opposite of what they need to be doing. But they think it's true because they rolled really well.
That sounds like a really great way to set up a TPK.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
Well, ideally, if you're playing The Witcher, you have a Witcher in your party who could be like, wait, no. Yeah. But you don't have to. I guess I'll answer the question. Or did you have more, Brian?
No, I like a lot of things. I start talking, hope that I'll reach the point somewhere in the middle of what I'm saying, and then run out of things to say because I've realized I've exhausted every possible permutation of the conversation.
Okay. I would say preparing for to like run on a stream is very different than when I write adventures for publication. Because when I'm prepping for a stream, I'm only writing for, my DM notes are for me. So I can just write nonsense. At a session 0, or even midway through, like at a session 0.5, we'll talk with the players about, how much of this is a game versus how much of this is a show, because we still want to be entertaining, even though we're playing a game. Like, you don't want people to be bored watching you play a game. When I'm writing for publication, not everybody understands what's in my brain, and I've learned you have to be really specific, especially if you're writing mechanics. If it's not spelled out, it can mean whatever the person reading it wants it to be. So, particularly with subclasses or monsters, there has to be specificity in there, unless it's a system where, you just want a bare bones type thing. But if you're writing for D&D, for Scarred Lands, for Pugmire, you need specifics in there, or it can go pretty off the rails quickly. Also, I tend to write shorter things for publication, but that's generally just because I'm given limits in word count. But my brain has started working that way. Like, I'm used to being asked to write an adventure, and my word count is anywhere from 1,500 to 5,000 words. So I get either a 2 or 3 act structure for the adventure. And even if I have an unlimited word count, I tend to keep it around like 3,500 to 5,000 words. So recently I got hired to do something much longer, and I was like, I don't know how to do this.
How about 3 adventures pushed together?
Right. I really was like, it's like, is it a campaign? Is it what is it? And then realized, oh, right, I have room to like flesh things out and not just be like, the room is dark. I can describe the darkness. So, yeah.
Yeah, I sort of learned how to run games from people who were very much into improv. Like, it's a weird combination of improv and David Mamet. So with Mamet, your characters are always super focused. There's always a goal. There's always something to be chasing down. But with improv, you also have the sort of yes and attitude. And so it's sort of interesting for me writing. So if I'm writing for a specific group, like if I'm writing for my Changeling game, one of the characters is a satyr. And so with last week's game, I wanted everyone to have a chance to experience ennui because I'm slowly introducing the more complicated mechanics. And so I'm like, okay, well, he runs across a picnic. There's, wine, women, and song. What do you do? But if I was writing the same adventure, uh, like if I was going to publish it on Storytellers Vault, which is long-term goal, but let's see if I actually get it done. Anyway, the directions would be a lot more different for the storyteller because I don't know if there's going to be a satyr. I just have to figure out, and like you said, Jess, like I've got maybe 200 words to be like, here's how you figure out how to make it personal for your characters.
You can just cheat like I did and provide pre-gens.
Yes, I am working on a Changeling Chronicle right now with pre-gens, and it's very easy to write their personal plot. That's what
Yeah.
I call a personal plot.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and like I really like making it personal because I feel that is what makes a more memorable and meaningful experience.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's nice if you give a couple hooks in an adventure you're writing, if one of the hooks is that if it's something affecting a town. Like I did this in Book of Season Solstices, which you could buy on the DM's Guild. Plug. One of the possible hooks is that the characters can be from the town, and then they might get advantage on certain history rolls to figure out lore of what's going on because they know it, but also they're more invested in what's happening to the town than if they just happen to stop by and then suddenly monsters are attacking.
Yes.
I think it also depends in part on the system, because the story path system has the paths, which imply NPCs, but you never define them until you actually need them. And then in I've read Trinity Continuum once, and that was months ago, so I'm not so hot on that. But I know, but in Scion, when you invoke your path, you can then rather than just saying, "Oh yes, my path gives me access to person A," like Simon, whatever, you define Simon as what Simon's good at, where Simon lives, what Simon's skills are based around, that kind of thing. So even for writing material for publication, even if you don't have pre-gens, you can still make a personal quote unquote plot by having having a list of organizations or whatnot that the paths might be related to rather than the actual characters.
Yeah. And I've written mostly for D&D or D&D type things because honestly that's what sells the most. But so for all of those, tying them into things, I try and put little things that is ties to characters in ways that they might not even notice, like tying things into their background. So it might be later like characters with this background don't have to roll. They just know this. Or NPCs are more likely to be nice to characters, like a guard might automatically respect a player character with a soldier background and fill them in on what's going on. So little things like that I feel like backgrounds don't come up that much in 5e and affiliated
OGL
things.
Games.
As I would say, it's still an improvement over previous systems. Is an attempt to implement some form of role-playing bonuses, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it should definitely have a bigger role, I believe.
My experience with 5e backgrounds is usually the DM has way too much to keep track of. And so if you want your background to become important to the story, you as the player have to be in charge of centering that and bringing it up.
Yeah. As someone who's 2.5 years into a 5e campaign, the only background I can remember 2 backgrounds. One is my partner's because I made the character with her, so obviously I know what that one is. And 2 is that the gnome warlock is an outlander because I know that they can always find food because of him. But those are the only 2 backgrounds I know, because one is actually relevant most of the time in the game because they're exploring, and the other one is just I did it. I picked it.
Yeah.
Or I helped pick it.
It's like one in Paws and Claws. One of only one of our players really brings up his background a lot, and it's because he was a merchant. So he has an ability to say that anywhere they go, he's sold to someone there. So if they are trying to infiltrate somewhere, as soon as he gets there, if they're having like, if they're stuck, he's like, so who have I sold to here? And I'm like, shit, I have to come up with an NPC for you.
That is a great hook for you though. Like if you
Yeah.
don't know what to do, like, yeah, this goblin once bought a dagger off him, or like, oh, with fake money or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's an incentive to.
I mean, you can always make them do the work. Like, I don't know, who did you sell to here?
Yeah, bounce the question back.
I think I did do that once where I was like, actually, it's not someone you sold to. It's your rival merchant who's here.
Nice.
Just as a slight alteration of that idea, something, because I obviously if you buy a lot of published material, mostly for 5e OGL stuff, but I assume other games as well, with random tables of encounters that can happen. I'm not a big fan of those. I'd rather have like a curated experience at the table. Like I have something that I think will be cool. But if there is a long travel sequence coming up, I generally just ask my players what cool thing happens.
I love that.
Because it's like it's not actually, it did in one case it did alter the story, so it gives them power, but it's not usually something that's going to alter the story in any meaningful manner. But it's not my table, it's our table.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd rather use your ideas than, I mean, it's obviously in a pinch, random encounter tables are great. I'm not saying don't use them and that the devil's work and should never be touched, but they're by their very nature vague and generalized. And for someone who doesn't run published material, like I'll take scenes and story beats from campaign settings and from written chronicles and adventures and whatnot, but I'll just slot them into my own adventure. So without the background of what that table was written for, usually they're not all that useful. And then the ones that are just kind of terrain encounters are super vague.
Yeah.
Or not suitable, depending on the setting. So I generally just turn out my players, or do the same as like, yeah, who did you sell to? Or like one of my players is a rogue, and occasionally, he's a rogue, he's got a criminal contact from his criminal background.
Mm-hmm.
Occasionally he'll say, oh, I know someone. Who do I know? Like, I don't know. Who do you know? What do they do? Because I'm lazy and you can do all the work for me.
I will say about random tables though, if you are writing something that you're publishing and you do have like a travel thing or something that players can investigate, writing a random table specific for that travel scene or for stuff that they can find is a really fun way to flesh out that travel scene.
For sure.
Yeah, and
importing them into other adventures. Sorry, I cut you off.
Oh, no, just in my experience, those sorts of tables are actually really, really helpful for new GMs and for people who are maybe just running their first campaign. And they're like, how do I generate content? How do I generate enough stuff to be entertaining? Oh, here's a table. That's great. I can use that. And, once you get more experience, you can sort of generate your own random table, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
They're fun to write, too.
Yes.
And to just build on that really briefly, it says random, but for anyone who in chat who might be considering, playing their own, running their own game, it might say random, but there's nothing stopping you just picking what you want from it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or picking all of them. If it's a short run. Like I've had random tables that you just roll a d4. So they can have 4 encounters. That's fine.
Yeah. I've been running the Storm King's Thunder adventure for a while in D&D, and that actually has a really interesting table for stuff you can find in a giant's bag, like what they're carrying with them. And cool. A lot of this stuff is pretty pointless or useless, but it's fun. But you should be careful with this because your players are obviously going to be like, all right, what is this thigh bone? What's the function of this thigh bone? They're going to obsess over it, which could be good, could be bad, depending on what you want to do with it. You could definitely run with it and have it actually mean something or just be a huge red herring. But I think in general, I've not publicized anything myself, so I feel like I shouldn't give advice on something I'm not good at. But in general, run it with people, run it with different people, ask other people to run what you've written, and you can just watch. And for God's sake, don't be like, no, it's supposed to be that. Just watch people running your game to get like, all right, okay, so here was a hitch. They didn't know what to do here. Improve it. Like, you cannot run a game too often. For you, it will be boring when you run it the sixth time, but for the people trying it, they've never done it before. So definitely, if you're gonna go for publicizing something, you need to make sure that it's been played enough times that any kind of player will be able to work out of it, and any kind of dungeon master or storyteller.
Yeah, players love to mess around with the games. Like, I ended up adding an entire new ending and souping up a boss for a certain thing that I published. And Book of Seasons Equinox is right behind me. Because I had written like 2 possible endings. And in my playtest, my first playtest group, they wanted both. So they're like, we want to help this girl, but then we also want to go back and like get vengeance on her behalf and murder the guy. And I've run a game. I didn't write this one. This was in Uncaged. But the Threeflings saved a guy from a Rusalka, then found out why the Rusalka was trying to kill him. And they threw him back in the water and drowned him. So they got both endings. So, yeah, just know that players are going to be weird and play test your games.
For sure.
So we got a question from Mr. Rel Bulbo. Decided this year to try and put some of my adventure/chronicle content out for public consumption and feedback. What would be your advice for starting to get stuff out there? My advice would be connect to the community, because no matter what content creation program that's going on, in my experience, there is a community of creators already there. And so your first step would be, find those people. So there's a great Discord for DM's Guild. The Storytellers Vault group is really, really great. And, everyone there is really supportive, especially of newcomers. So that, I think, should be your first step.
Yeah, the Onyx Path Discord in general has different channels for different game lines, and like I posted my Scion stuff in the Scion channel, for example. I mean, technically there is a community content channel as well, but everyone just uses the main channel. I was at social media publication promotion. Stream it if you can. So that's very privileged to be able to say that. I know, I'm aware of that.
I would also recommend, if you want like guidance or if you're looking for mentorship in a way, join the RPG Writers Workshop. If money is a fact, Ashley Warren runs it. They go every couple seasons, but I know she does have scholarships every season. This most recent one, she had like a bunch of scholarships due to a donation. So I know that's not free, but it can be free. And that's a really helpful way to just get feedback on your work, think about your work in different ways, and learn about... I feel like a lot of times as writers, we're good at one or two things. Like, I know that I'm good at the writing part, and I'm okay at finding free art, but I am garbage sauce at layout. And that workshop teaches you about layout. It teaches you about marketing. It teaches you about how to make your adventures accessible, like screen reader friendly and stuff like that. It teaches you how to write descriptive image descriptions.
I'm gonna go take that course right after this.
You know what I mean?
I really need
I know,
it.
me too.
Yeah.
Marketing is my big weakness.
Yeah, I'm in the specific marketing workshop right now, and I've been kind of slacking on it because I've had other stuff going on. But it's great, and the community there is really supportive. And at the end of the workshop, the idea is that everyone publishes a one shot, and then they all get published in like a group together, and those tend to sell really well.
Neat.
I think if you're going into this to publish something, there's a couple of things I would immediately think. Again, I haven't published anything myself, but like, kill your darlings. If you'll have an idea that you think is amazing, be ready to either have to defend it or revise it, because a lot of people are going to have opinions about it. Be ready for, I don't want to say failure, that's a terrible word, but be ready for the fact that people might not jump at your idea. You're going to,
I think
sorry.
I think a good way to sort of convey that is keep your expectations realistic.
Yeah, exactly.
No one is making a living off of this unless they are literally doing it 40, 50, 60 hours a week.
Mhm.
So, do it to have fun.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
super tough business. And even though today we have so many more platforms for people starting out to publish their own stuff, like imagine this 20 years ago, like you had to go through a whole bunch of processes. We have a saturation as well. Like it's growing. There are so many different systems out there. And a lot of games have really big names connected to them, and they're obviously going to pull more attention. Don't compare your own successes to other people. Temper your expectations. Be happy for small successes. If you get a positive review, screenshot that.
Yeah.
Have it as your wallpaper on your PC. So every time you start up your PC, you see that review. That's what I do with my channel. Like all the positive feedback I get, I just plaster into one big picture, and it will grow over time. And it's so much more visible as a sign of progress rather than looking at numbers going up or down or whatever. Just look at the positive stuff. But it is, and I think Jess, you said before that 5e super popular. So obviously, depending on which system you pick, like if you pick a system that not a lot of people play, on the one hand, you will provide content for a system that there's not much content for. On the other, might not be many people playing. 5e could hit gold. It could also disappear into like a river of content. So there's pros and cons to both. Again, this is really me talking out of something, but I hope I'm making sense here.
No, I'll tag off of that and say, like, check the platforms where you want to publish, because I think the three biggest right now, and two of them are owned by the same company, would be DM's Guild, Drive-Thru RPG, and Itch. So if you're going to publish on DM's Guild, it has to be 5e content. If you're going to publish on Drive-Thru RPG, it is really hard to break in unless you are using one of the community content programs. For example, if you are going to publish something for Scarred Lands, that would be the Sluretian Vault. If you're going to publish for Pugmire, that is Canis Minor. So that is a way to get your stuff seen. Check and see if there is a community content program for the thing you want to publish. If you want to publish something that uses 5e but isn't D&D, that is also going to be on Drive-Thru RPG. But make sure that you are only using 5e stuff from the SRD, the Standard Reference Document, because otherwise you will get sued. So be very careful about that.
Yeah, that's a good point, is whatever you publish, the rules are different for each sort of community content program. So like with Storytellers Vault, you can publish fiction. You can publish short stories and novels if you like. DM's Guild will not let you do that.
Yep. And DM's Guild is also exclusive, and they take 50% of your profits. Drive-Thru RPG can be exclusive, but doesn't have to be. So you can put your stuff there and also on Itch, unless you're in the community content program, in which case it is exclusive.
Yeah, like DM's Guild, you can only use their 5th edition. Storytellers Vault, you cannot use Vampire 5th edition.
Yeah. So check the rules.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to get sued. You don't want to work really hard to get something ready for publication and then to have it taken down, because it hurts. And I recommend Itch. Like, I put a lot of nonsense on Itch. If you go to Itch, Angry Nerd Girl, you will see I just published a game there called Dumpster Fire, because a game for 2020. And it...
Yeah, it just came out punching from the goal.
Yeah, it's a lasers and feelings hack. But you'll find there's a lot of game jams on Itch. You get a much larger percentage of your profits. Like, anything, like 50% is ridiculous. And I think we all know that. But Itch, I think, takes 10, and it can take less if you want it to. But the thing is that fewer people go there because they think of it as a video game site. So you really have to push your own stuff to get views on it. Like, I know if I'm screaming on Twitter about something that I just wrote and published on Itch, I will get a lot of hits over there, and then people will buy it. Or if I just did a game jam and then the person who ran the jam is like, hey, here's all the things in the jam, I'll get a lot of purchases. And then I will get nothing until I make a new game. Whereas on DM's Guild or Canis Minor, it's just pretty steady.
Yeah, although I have noticed when I release a new title through the community content programs, like, I get a whole bunch of initial sales because that's just how it goes. But I've also noticed a small boost of other titles also do really well.
Yeah, because they do the, like,
not really
also
well,
buy
but,
this
Yeah.
person, and people who bought this also bought.
Yeah.
I'd also say, like, if you're trying to get content out there, if you already have content out there, so this is from experience, but so I released classes on the DM's Guild, and then I decided to set up a Patreon using OGL material. I was like, and obviously it's on the DM's Guild. It's technically not my property anymore. I get 50% of the proceeds, but it's not my property.
Mm-hmm.
But I can take that as the version 1.0 of that class, take all of the lessons I learned from writing it and in the, like, 2 years since I wrote that class, and then do a revised version, which is mechanically different, but thematically pretty much the same. I'm not going to lie. But it's then my own. So it's kind of, yeah, take the feedback on board. But as Chris said, don't be afraid to kill your darlings. Don't be afraid to just throw them out and start again from scratch if needs be, or just take what works or what sort of works and then just hammer it into shape until it fits what you want to do with it. And most importantly, there's no serial numbers on it.
Yeah.
And for writing in general, if you have word counts, I mean, I just said I had to add in description because I'm so used to cutting it. Because trust your DMs, they know how to make an evocative scene. Like, they'll appreciate description, but they don't need you to describe, like, to give them 7 words for how a room smells. If you just say, like, this room is dark and smells of death and no one has been here for 10 years, they will tell that to the players in a creepy, evocative way. Yeah. You don't have to give them a whole paragraph describing the room.
I totally understand why box text is there. It's the same reasons the random tables are there. So people who aren't as comfortable with evocative description or with scenes and stuff. But like with my Scion adventure, I deliberately didn't use boxed text. I have text in boxes. It's design notes and kind of this is what the scene is about, is designed to teach or to show. Very much in a similar fashion to in the Pugmire rulebook. If you go to the adventure at the back, it says like scene outline.
Yeah,
that's pretty much what I use box text for. And I have descriptive text, but it's italicized. It's not separate from the rest of the text. It's not designed to be read aloud. It is designed to give you a mood or a feeling or a basic understanding of the scene, which you then build upon.
Yeah. And on that cue, you can also, like something I did for myself when I wrote my adventure for the cult game that I ran, was for every scene I had a list, what can the players learn? And instead of going, oh, if they talk to this person, that's a lot of text, and it kind of puts the GM or DM or storyteller in a very narrow corridor. Just be like, all right, this is the scene. These are the characters present. This is what can be learned in this session. How they learn it, you can leave that up to the person running the game. These are like, for me, that was very useful because Cult is basically a hack of Powered by the Apocalypse, very loose set of rules. Well, not very loose, but
rules.
Yeah, it's more like Yeah, guidelines. Let the players be creative. If they want to use magic on a character to get this information, you know what they can get. You want to always try to have pre-made adventures failing forward, because if you design a game where it's like, oh, they didn't manage to do this, yes, they won't reach the end of the adventure.
Guess they die.
Yes, that's very. I don't want to cast shade here, but that's very late '90s, early '00s kind of storytelling. I love failing forward. Like, it's much easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add one more thing. If you are writing something for, like, it's your stuff, but you are submitting it as part of an anthology, because anthologies are really popular right now. First of all, don't expect to make a lot of money, because anthologies tend to be split like 45 different ways. So you'll get, 1% of sales. But also stick to the template that you are given. If you're writing something for yourself, find a template that you like. The template is your best friend. That's all.
Yes. And stick to word count. Because going too far under or too far over, you know, excuse me,
Yeah.
if there's an established budget.
Hmm?
Oh, did I? Yeah.
No, you're working.
You're
good.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
Oh, yeah, just I usually, you don't have to be on the nose. So like if you have a 5,000 word assignment, you can write 5,050, that's fine, but not 5,500.
Yeah. I write for my videos every week. I have a very specific word count. I have 2,000 words, excluding the credits. I mean, everyone knows this, but you get better at it the more you do it. Like, for me, I used to have to do revisions, cut content, stuff like that. These days, I usually manage to hammer out a good script on the first go, and then do some slight modifications. So write all the time, and always keep that word limit in mind.
Also, if you can get an editor, I would recommend it. Most editors will do it for revenue share or for service swap.
Yeah.
And that goes back to what Rachel said, making friends in the community, putting yourself out there. There's a reason that my complete games on itch are, the most expensive one is $3.50, whereas my one-shot adventure on DM's Guild is almost $7, because nothing on itch has an editor except me. It has layout by me. Everything that I have on DM's Guild and Drive Thru RPG has editors and artists, and is generally, like, professional.
To build on that, as an editor, if you do, revenue share, reach an agreement with an editor, please be okay with the fact that there will be feedback and criticism. Because if you're just getting us to look at it, then you're wasting our time as well as yours.
The
but if
editor
you're
is
like
your
without
best
paying
friend.
attention,
They're killing your babies to help you.
As also an editor, I've had to pull out of projects where I'm like, all right, you're obviously not listening to me. So like it can be difficult because I have written stuff and I've gotten red lines back and I've been like, why don't you recognize my brilliance? And then, you take a moment and you're like, okay, no, this is actually good feedback. I really should make these changes. And just sort of keep in mind that when your editor sends you stuff back, it's not personal. It's not you suck and here's why. It's we both want this work to be as good as possible. And that's why I'm giving you the feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah, because your editor's name is going to be on it too. And they don't,
Yeah.
I mean, generally. And they don't.
No, the project I pulled out of, I'm like, nope.
No.
Yeah. And that's going to be tough as well, because it's being able to say no is also something you will need to be able to develop in this business for sure.
And the ability to realize when a cause is lost anyway in your own project.
Oh yeah, for sure. Sometimes it's just not the time for that. You just gotta go back to it later.
Yeah. So We've got a question from Deacon Ket. My question involves, what about a coterie versus individual player sessions? With the idea being bringing the group together, but starting with separate intrigues that all skew together via interested parties.
I think that's a cool idea.
It is. I mean, I've done this not explicitly like this, but through like in character chat threads on messenger programs between sessions, because I don't know, obviously Deacon Cat's like time availability, but I have not that much time to do independent sessions for one-on-one player interactions. So like I run the regular like 2.5 3 hours, and then follow up with in character chat threads, as I said, or as a player, like even if it's not explicitly GM endorsed is the wrong word, but it instigated. If it's not GM instigated, we'll still have in character conversations out of the game, just to help build ideas. And like I will say, if you're going to do that as a player, also include your GM or DM or whatever the game specific terminology is.
Yeah.
Because that's how they get to know how your characters are fleshed out. Otherwise, it's kind of the storyteller's curse of, I have this wonderful world back here that you're never going to see.
Yeah. I think starting out this way would be difficult. It really depends on what if the players are fine with it, if they want to run with it that way, because that also means that you're creating characters that are being thrown together. Like separating out of character here, out of character, everyone wants to play together. In character, these people will be getting to know each other possibly for the first time, which can sometimes cause friction in character, because obviously you are less likely to trust someone you're just joining. It's difficult. It's a difficult concept. When I run my cult games, I do it play by post. I always have like whatever horror vision my players are experiencing, I will give them individually in separate chats, and then I say, it's up to you if you want to share it with the others, but this is what you're experiencing, which I believe add a layer of distrust in the group, because that's one of the themes we're going for. But it's got to be something everyone's agreed to, and it takes a whole lot more work to do it this way than to just have the coterie or the party right from the get-go. And if you have the party coterie from the get-go, there's this unwritten contract in the group that we're all in this together, unless again specifically you said everyone hates each other or distrusts each other. But if you're being introduced organically, it can make for really cool role-playing, but it's going to be a whole lot more work. Not necessarily a bad thing, but something to keep in mind.
There is a middle ground, if you don't mind me building on that. So I did this for the Scion adventure I wrote for the show on the channel, and I stole from Fiasco, essentially, because it was an introductory adventure intended for both people new to the hobby or for people new to Scion, or both. I wrote, it added way more work than I should probably have done, but I did it anyway. I provided seeds and characters for one 10-minute long scene focused on each player character, and then tried to kind of summarize Fiasco's approach of, here's something that can happen. It's something that goes wrong. It's drama. Drama fuels every story. Here is something that can happen for each background character that any of the other players at the table can hop in and play. And I kind of because I've just finished playing that adventure through on the channel. I finished yesterday actually, as an actual play. I'm probably going to go back and tweak it and say that anyone who hops in and does that is either going to add an extra momentum to the pool, which is is a mechanic in Scion, or just gets an experience. They can only gain one experience that way. They can't get one experience per scene, but it gives people at the table something to do rather than. So you get the spotlight and the focus on an individual character and kind of that building, but also everyone is involved in the process. So they're invested in a way that you won't get if you just do one-on-one sessions.
Yeah. My advice would be give them different reasons to want the same thing. So for my Changeling game last week, it's set in 1200s Byzantium. Uh, and I got the idea for what the Chronicle was going to be about by reading the Wikipedia for the Fourth Crusade, which was, yeah, at some point, the imprisoned son of the deposed emperor escaped from jail. I'm like, oh, well, what if the changelings did it? What if they're the people who got him out of prison? And so last game we had a prison break, and it was a lot of fun. And each character had their own reason for wanting to be there and for wanting to be involved. Because they have connections in the city, and a lot of people actually wanted this guy out of jail. Uh, so yeah, start with your individual uh side scenes, session zeros, session 0.5. Um, so figure out what you want the players to be working on together and give them, good personal individual reasons for why they want to accomplish it. Or, if you're running that kind of game, give them reasons to not want it. You know, you should have a group that trusts each other if you want to go that direction.
Yeah. I want to add that I think doing individual player sessions or even small group like side scene sessions can be really fun either as an epilogue or as if there's a time that not every player can come, doing like a side story or an individual story can be cool and a way to get into character interactions that you might not be able to do with a full group, especially if it's with a big group. So you might be able to flesh out like what two characters have in common. I was running a game called Princesses Save Dragons, where it was legally distinct from Disney princesses going out to rescue dragons. And we finished the campaign. They rescued all of the dragons. But a couple of them came to me afterwards and were like, I really would like to still play as this character. The mermaid who had sold her voice to her warlock patron was interested in taking on her warlock patron. And so that's one that we were looking at doing either as an individual epilogue where she could bring any of the other princesses with her if they were free. But, if they aren't or don't want to come, she and I can just do that as like a personal cap for her, and each princess can have, especially now that we have time, a little personal ending epilogue now that they've, finished the group campaign.
Yeah. Chris, do you have any?
Oh, I mean, I think it's important always to stop and check with your group, like how is it progressing, is it up to their expectations, and then just kind of don't be afraid to go back and rewrite stuff, like or not go back, but be like, all right, so the thread I was following right now is not super working, modify that, something like that. I have to admit, I got a little bit sidetracked right now. I was thinking of something else, so I don't have much to add, actually, to be honest. So maybe we can. I'll just leave it at that. Don't be afraid to remake your plans, essentially, to change it and to listen in what the players are expecting or wanting.
So we've got about 20 minutes left, and I think this is gonna have to be a lightning round, which is gonna be a lot of fun because the next question on our list is what makes a good plot line. So I'm sure we could do a whole show about just this question. I'm gonna start by saying I feel that the core of roleplay is about choice. And when you are writing a story for an individual group, for a general adventure, always keep in mind what choices am I asking them to make.
I
My-
agree. Oh, sorry.
So I was just going to say my gut reaction is one that people will talk about for months, years to come.
I'm sorry?
One that your players or even people who are like nearby when you were playing talk about for months, years to come.
I think anything that doesn't make your players go, why isn't someone else doing this, for example? That's always a good start. Like try to always make it make sense for why the players are doing it. Games like Vampire or any kind of World of Darkness or Chronicles of Darkness game is easier in that regard because there's very easy to throw in personal motivation, power building like that. But in games like Dungeons and Dragons, when it's a matter of saving the world or things like that, sometimes the players might be like, my character doesn't want to do this. So obviously session 0 will help you with that. But I agree that meaningful choices don't necessarily mean that you haven't already kind of decided what's going to happen, leaving room for change, obviously, because you don't want to be too controlling. But if you like meaningful choices for a character, like if a player goes and goes, oh, I had no idea my character was going to act this way, or this was a huge moment for my character's personal development, often because of a personal choice. I agree with you that that's definitely something to strive for. I think small victories, you definitely don't want to fall into the trap of constantly throwing threats at your players, because that's exhausting, and you will eventually feel like you're just what's it called, the phrase, kicking water or treading
Kicking
water?
rocks or treading water?
Treading
Yeah,
water.
treading water.
Like, yeah, always trying to keep your head above the surface. I'm guilty of this in my Changeling campaign, unfortunately, my poor players. But small victories. Don't be afraid of doing a bottle episode, like super focused on a small thing. People will remember, your players will remember that and appreciate you slowing down the pace and be like, all right, let's just focus on this one thing today. Some of my advice for that anyway.
Yeah, I would just say something that gives maybe not even the characters, but the players themselves either learn something about themselves or surprises them. And something that they have fun with. I mean, that's really basic, but like if they're not having fun and you're not having fun, then something's wrong.
Yeah, Synthetic Divine said something really good in chat, is that it's so much dependent upon the tastes of the players. And I very much agree. And I think that's why it's really important for you to know your players well, or at least, well enough to understand what kind of storylines resonate here.
Yeah.
So, and if you're running a game for people that you don't necessarily know, or if you're writing a generic adventure, be upfront, like in the introduction, be like, this is a game, this is an adventure about the following things. And so if that is interesting to people, they'll want to be like,
Right.
oh, yeah, this is
Kitty!
Kitty. Yeah,
Oh.
like this is about the cat reminded me of what Jess said earlier about her game, about cats having moral and existential quandaries. Yeah,
It's a
I would
relevant
be
point,
like,
yeah.
"Oh, that sounds cool." Another player might be like, I just want to play a cat.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't play for philosophy.
I just want to be a cat with a sword.
Oh, she's mad right now. Yeah, connecting to what you just said, is that if you're running a game at a con, if you're running a pre-made game, that people have, I wouldn't say lower expectations, but people have different expectations on a game where they don't know you. So it's fine to be a little bit more obvious with the story. It's fine to make it, yeah, it's a heist. It's basically Ocean's 11, but in a fantasy world. That's fine. People are going to have a great time anyway. Give enough room for everyone to shine. Make sure you end it on a high note. If you're running a game with people you will never meet again, or possibly never meet again, you don't want them to fail. Like, obviously, if things go really bad, it's not going to be a great ending. But if people are leaving the table and be like, yeah, we pulled out by the skin of our teeth. You did a good job. Really don't have to worry too much about the depth of character development in those kind of games. Sorry for addition.
So anyone else have a contribution? Otherwise, I think maybe...
More just to second what Chris just said. I mean, I don't run convention one-shots. I run 6-week games. Usually the first week is, with V5 specifically, is character creation, but it still goes as 5 weeks of people I don't know to tell a story, and it's kind of pretty much exactly what Chris said, just from a 1-session thing to a 6-session thing.
Yeah, so we are coming up on time. So I want to thank everybody for being here. Ryan, thank you so much for being our guest star. And I guess if we just want to go around real quickly and talk about the shows that we run, where to find us on Itch or other programs, where to find lore videos. So Ryan, if you want to tell us where we can find you online.
Sure thing, yes. So I mentioned I stream usually video game stuff, but I'm always happy to talk about role-playing games. On Twitch as Comrade Bubbles. I'm on Twitter as @ComradeBubbles, although it'll come up with Ryan as well, because I don't mind people knowing my first name. And there's no reason not to. Highly social career. I also, as I mentioned, I freelance GM as the Moonlit Bard at gmail.com. If you have any games you want to play, feel free to hit me up and I'll see if I can fit you in and we can work something out. Obviously, time zones can be a bit of a problem sometimes, but if there's anything good to come out of the whole garbage fire the world is on right now, it's the increased awareness of online role-playing opportunities. I also, before going on to Onyx Path stuff, I also run a Patreon focused on 5e OGL material as the Moonlit Bard there. That's purely because, going back to the I have a world no one's ever going to see note thing, I decided I have a world I want everyone to see, and yes, they can pay me for the privilege of doing so. But that's kind of, at the minute, ultimately it's going to be more of like an Atlas kind of campaign setting thing. But at the minute, it's kind of the introduction of this is how the world works. This is a rough history. These are races that you can play as, etc., etc. And then for the Onyx Path specifically, I stream bi-weekly, I think it is, because apparently fortnightly isn't a thing in all of the English-speaking world, which really confused me the first time. I was like, yes, a fortnight, and one of my American friends was really confused. Bi-weekly for the Onyx Path. Next week is my next stream. For Behind the Screen, which is just a adventure writing show where I talk to chat, get chat's input, explain my design process and things like that.
What time does that run?
9 a.m. Eastern.
Okay. And of course, if people can't make it that early, we host all previous shows on our Twitch channel. So subscribe and get early access.
Yes, you get a week's exclusivity, and then it goes up on both my channel and my YouTube channel and Onyx Paths.
Which we can find your YouTube at Comrade Bubbles as well.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay.
I also have a Discord server, but that's beyond the point.
Chris, how about you? Where can we find you?
Yes, I am easily found on Twitter as the Primogen, one word, and on my YouTube channel where I do lore videos for World of Darkness, primarily Vampire. I also occasionally stream games, stuff like that. I've run a short Chicago by Night chronicle called Chicago Stories. And roughly every second Sunday, I'm also actually doing some world creation or chronicle creation. I stream that on YouTube. I'm making Stockholm by Night, which will be playable by my patrons at some point. Hopefully, maybe we'll see. My creative process is very chaotic, so I'm trying to put that into a system. But something we didn't talk a lot about today is all the amazing digital tools we have online, I use a lot of those, like Google Maps and Kumo and stuff like that. And also, I run a weekly game on Thursdays, Changeling the Lost Little Brook Reunion, which is coming up to episode 23 or 24 right now. We do run it on 4 p.m. Eastern. And it's a 2-hour game. So we're playing tomorrow. Come and join us. We are, maybe I'm not supposed to say this, but we are kind of getting close to the end. It's not even the end of the beginning. It's the beginning of the end. Maybe, I don't know. I'm mangling that quote. But I don't know how long we will be running it for. But we are seeing the end of the horizon. So who knows what's going to come after that. Thank you.
Jess, how about you? Where can we find you?
I'm pretty findable on Twitter at miss_Jess03. You can also find me on the Onyx Path channel every Tuesday for Paws and Claws at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can find me on my own Twitch channel, Angry Nerd Girl. I run Three Flings, like I mentioned, Friday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern. I occasionally do bedtime stories that I lately have been reading Poe and Grimm's fairy tales. If you want me to read you a story, I will do that. And I just started streaming with Sigil Entertainment's channel on Saturdays at, when do we play? 3 p.m. Eastern. It's a bunch of artists and game designers and creators, and we're all playing our own content. And so you can see us basically showing you the stuff that we made. And apart from that, I write games and stuff. You can see literally all of them on my website, Jessica Markram Writes. I've got a Patreon if you want to join it. It's Miss Jess. But yeah, you can get all of that on my Twitter. I would say if you want D&D stuff, get Book of Seasons Equinoxes. It's right behind me. It's really great. It's spring-themed adventures. So since you can't go outside right now, your characters can go outside and experience the spring. And if you have ever wanted to play a game as an opossum, a rat, a raccoon, or a stack of books, buy Dumpster Fire on itch.
You've got me there.
Great. I am Rachel. You can find me pretty much everywhere under Stolen Fire or Stolen Fires, depending on who got what first on which platform. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Ko-Fi. I technically have a Twitch that I should probably start using a lot more. You can find me here on Thursdays. Following up after Chris's game, I run Changeling the Dreaming, and that starts at 9:30 Eastern. We are currently set in Byzantium in the run up to the Fourth Crusade, so that's going to be a lot of fun. And just in general, right now, Onyx Path is having some deals and specials. A couple bundles are discounted on Indie Press Revolution. So there's a bunch of cool stuff if you're looking for new content, new material for your groups. Also, 6 days from now, Technocracy Reloaded. It will hit Kickstarter. Uh, Play the bad guys. Involve them in your stories.
That's
Chris has
technically not, they're not bad guys. They just have a different view on things.
Says the Tremere.
I'm in a crossover mage changeling game, and the Technocracy aren't they're the antagonists, and so my changeling character is like, so who are the Technocracy?
I mean, if you're a reality deviant, then anyone who's supporting common sense is going to be your enemy. That's.
I mean, the way that the mages explained the Technocracy was such that my character who's a Scatha, she heard these guys are responsible for the shattering. I'm like, oh. Well, we're gonna get
responsible. I think you're tossing around a lot of heavy words here.
Anyway, this is just a demonstration of how wonderful and complex Technocracy is. I believe you can also go into the previous shows. Travis Legg ran a session of Technocracy Reloaded for the writers. So I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard really good things about it. So check that out. Yeah, so thank you everybody for watching. Thank you for all the really cool and insightful questions. And hopefully we'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.